No witch trials in New London County, although John Mason, the founder of Norwich, and the one that Mason School was named after, really one of our most revered founders, actually did serve as a judge on several witch trials in other parts of the state.
So where was the trial? Where would it have been held?
Well, he served as a judge on a trial in Old Saybrook and on one in Hartford. In Norwich, though, we almost had our own version of what happened in Salem. And this,
so that's right, in Norwich Town by the Green.
Yes,
right?
in Norwich Town.
That's where Mason lived. Yes.
Yes, but in Norwich Town in the 1680s. Now, the first minister of the First Congregational Church of Norwich, Reverend Fitch, had a case that could easily have turned into another Salem. It was the early 1680s, and a young girl in his congregation suddenly began exhibiting the same symptoms. She was yelling out in church, she was rolling around in fits, she was crying out, and the townspeople gathered around her and began yelling, "Who afflicts you? Who is the witch?" And Reverend Fitch stood up and said, "No, you are wrong. To attempt to discover a witch in this fashion is witchcraft in itself. I will take her aside and pray over her and read psalms to her and not ask her any questions, just pray with her, and we'll see." And 2 days later, he announced that she was cured.
Oh my goodness.
Now, how do we know this? Because he wrote this in a letter to his fellow minister, Increase Mather, in Massachusetts. Increase Mather and his son Cotton Mather were the main forces behind the Salem witch trials. And Reverend Fitch wrote this letter in 1684 to Increase Mather saying, "You see, this is the way to treat girls who have fallen into fits." Increase Mather filed this among his papers and apparently never either didn't read it or didn't care to listen to it.
So what kind of powers were people afraid that witches had in the 1700s in Old England and New England?
Well, 1600s. Something very interesting happened in 1702. English common law stopped recognizing spectral evidence. Even though the crime of witchcraft remained on the books right until the 1900s, after 1700, it pretty much became impossible to prove in a court of law.
Yes.
Now, but people continued fearing witches, and they continued doing things like stoning them or shunning them or anything. But after that, there stopped being any way you could sue somebody for being a witch.
Yes, yes.
So what they feared, everything, there were what were called lesser witchcrafts or lesser enchantments, and that would be things like, this is the most absurd one, but it was real. In the 17th century in Connecticut, one woman accused her neighbor of being a witch because, she said, she could never get her water to boil in her kettle, and she couldn't make tea, and she couldn't boil her puddings.
Oh my goodness.
So she said that this had to be witchcraft because she saw the other woman walk by, and from then on she couldn't get her water to boil. Other people accused witches of drying up their cows, making it impossible to milk their cows, or spooking their horses. You know.
So instead of saying, "Oh, you're just driving me crazy," because such and such is happening, and instead they blamed it on witchcraft.
Yes. So those are but those were not capital offenses because they were not harm to human beings. They also feared that witches caused disease, whether it was what we might call epilepsy today, or tuberculosis today, or death in childbirth, or
so that was a strong subject in the colonial days.
It was. It was. And these fears were common really in other parts of the colonies, but the reason that they often went to trial in New England was that we had a theocracy. Church and state were not separate, and since it was believed that witches derived their powers only from Satan, then it was a religious matter as well as a legal matter. And so at the witch trials, the evidence that they were most interested in was not so much she made my pudding, she spoiled my pudding, she made my milk go sour, she spooked my horses, but he or she has sold their soul to Satan. And
so today, witchcraft, Wicca, would Satan be involved in witchcraft?
No.
Okay.
Well, I should say yes and no. There is such a thing these days as the Church of Satan. There is such a thing as Satanism. I am not much of an expert on it. I understand that Colin McEnroe had a show on NPR about it.
Oh, really?
If people are curious.
Say any areas that it might be practiced?
Yeah, no, but I really don't know as much about that.
That's dangerous.
But
I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Like what happened in Salem, Massachusetts. There was a story of some people being hurt physically, and they blamed it on Satanism, satanic rituals.
Yeah, the kind of satanic rituals that you learn about on the internet have very little to do with anything in
not to get
historical.
Involved in anything like that. No, that's not good.
But Wicca is part of a general manifestation called neo-paganism, or the neo-pagan revival, that has literally revived the worship of the old gods.
Okay. I want to ask you quickly, if people want to learn more about witches, what books do you recommend?
All right. Well, if you want a historical introduction, this book, which is Witch Hunting in 17th Century New England, is a documentary history. It actually reprints just about every document that we have from these trials, the transcripts of the trials, the accusations, the actual historical
documents. What's the title of that book?
This is Witch Hunting in 17th Century New England.
And can they find that at the local library?
Yes. David D. Hall is the author. He has several other books of this type. This is, if you want to read the transcripts for yourself, this is the place to look.
And this one you wrote?
Yes. My book, New England's Gothic Literature, History and Folklore of the Supernatural in the 17th through the 20th Centuries, long title, not that long a book. It is in print from the Edwin Mellon Press, but you will not find it at your local bookstore. It's a library press, and so many libraries, including Otis, have copies. And if Otis's copy does not circulate, other libraries do, you can always order it through interlibrary loan. And I cover the Salem witch trials in great detail, and also the Connecticut trials.
Okay, great. And this one?
This is a handbook to Gothic literature. Again, it's something you find in libraries, not bookstores. But I have the article in here on witches and witchcraft, and it's a pretty good, very short summary.
Okay, all right. I'd like to thank you, Faye, for joining me today. Very informative.
We're out of time already?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Oh, I should.
I know.
I'm sorry.
I might have to have you come back again, huh?
Yes.
But no, this book here you can get at the Otis Library?
Yes.
Okay.
But it doesn't circulate.
And if any of these books you are looking for and they don't have it in your library, you can order these books. So just so you know.
But can I do a quick website for you?
Sure.
There's been very little written about the Connecticut witch trials, but recently there's a novel called One of Windsor. And that's the name of her website as well.
Windsor.
Beth Caruso, One of Windsor, Connecticut's first and New England's first execution for witchcraft. Windsor, 1647.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me today. I really enjoyed learning something new. And I want to thank the viewers for joining me today. I hope you enjoy my show. And stay well and safe travels. Thank you.